In occultist and theosophist circles, a golden era is expected to return. Sometimes it's called the New Age or the Age of Aquarius. The phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum is Latin for New World Order or Order of the Ages. This famous motto appears on the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States and also on the back of the dollar bill. This is a reference to the fourth eclogue of the poet Virgil, who was an ancient Roman poet of the Augustan era. He composed three of the most famous poems in Latin literature, the Eclogues, the Georgics, and the epic Aeneid. He was born in 70 BC and died in 19 BC. You can read some of the lines from this poem on the screen. They're written in Latin, and they translate as the following. Now comes the final era of the Sibyl's song. The New World Order is born. And now justice returns. Saturn's reign returns. Now a new lineage is sent down from high heaven. When I started reading about the cult of Saturn, what I uncovered was fascinating and, I'll admit, a little scary. Virgil's poem goes on to talk about how the coming golden Saturnian age will start with the birth of a child, and this is an age-old theme. Saturn's returning reign is associated by occultists with the story of an apocalypse, which means unveiling, and the advent of a new golden age. I've just started reading a book called Lords of the Left-Hand Path by Stephen E. Flowers. One section that really caught my eye right at the outset was Flowers' explanation for this new coming age. He says that, quote, the sun is the polar opposite of Saturn. But because the core on one extreme contains the essence of its opposite, the path to Saturn is the surest path to the sun. In this way, the alchemical lead is transformed into gold. Standard Western magical symbolism ascribes lead to Saturn and gold to the sun. And then he goes on to describe one of the main teachings of the Fraternitas Saturni, which is Latin for Brotherhood of Saturn. This is a German magical order founded in 1926 by Eugene Groschi, aka Gregor A. Gregorius, and 4 others. It is one of the oldest continuously running magical groups in Germany. Flowers says this about the Brotherhood of Saturn, quote, because the Fraternitas Saturni has as one of its main teachings that the world is passing into an Aquarian-Uranian age, a fairly developed picture of the envisioned future emerges. The astrological sign Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, with his dark and distant aspects. This Aquarius-Uranian age ruled by Saturn will be one in which a spiritual elite will be increasingly powerful. End quote. The question then becomes, who are the members of this spiritual elite? And what do they believe? What are the origins of the cult of Saturn? According to the research of Jordan Maxwell, Saturn's name in the ancient Phoenician Canaanite religious tradition was El, E-L. Anyone who promoted the worship of El was an elder. This is the origin of the following terms. You got elected. You have moved up as in an elevator. You are now one of the elite. Where is Saturn worshipped? In a temple. From Saturn we get the dark side of the Force, as in Darth Vader in Star Wars. Saturn is the Lord of the Rings. Saturn is associated with the black sun, the dark side of the sun, the false light. Remember, the stronger a light shines, the deeper and darker the shadow that it casts. I started digging into this topic, and I was fortunate enough to find a book called The Cult of the Black Cube, a Saturnian Grimoire. A grimoire is a textbook of magic. This was published in 2017 by a Dr. Arthur Moros, which is a pseudonym. This is an extremely well-referenced book, and the author describes the origin and development, beliefs, and practices of the Saturnine cult. The book is an excellent source for understanding the cult of the Black Cube, as the author calls it, but it's currently out of print. The book is organized into several sections: an introduction, a section on scholarly materials on Saturn, which is further subdivided into a discussion of Saturn in Islamic texts, Saturn in the classical tradition, and Saturn in the Indian tradition, a section on Saturnine path, and a section on Saturnine practice. Because I think the information in this book is not readily available, I'll do a couple videos on it and then make some remarks about how the cult of Saturn is still alive and well in modern times. This is especially evident when you start paying attention to the symbolism. I will not cover the section of the book that deals with Saturnine practice, because frankly, I found reading about the rituals and methods for conjuring up dark entities to be highly disturbing. I consider myself a devotee of the right-hand path, and my job is to dispel the darkness from people, not conjure it up. And I have no desire to recite incantations and conduct rituals that I consider very, very dangerous because they're designed to please a dark force. The controllers of this world are well aware of this power too, and they use it against us. We need to understand what they're doing, and that is why we must study these ancient cults and their symbolism. The black cube is found everywhere in our modern world, and I'll have more comments on that later on. The lines that are quoted earlier from Virgil's fourth eclogue are written at the very beginning of this book, along with the translation that I read to you. And then, curiously, at the end of the book, under the title Editions, it says, quote, published by Theion Publishing in a strictly limited cloth hardcover edition of 720 copies, bound in gray-blue fine cloth, and an auric edition of 52 hand-numbered copies, fully bound in Saturnine black leather. All auric copies embed on the front a sigillized, embossed Saturnian lead plate individually consecrated to the deity. Combining the poisonous metal of Saturn with black animal leather sacred to the deity, each auric copy is a true Saturnine talisman, end quote. And a talisman is any object ascribed with religious or magical powers intended to protect, heal, or harm individuals for whom they are made. In the foreword to the book, the author says that the experiences, rituals, and practices of the cult of the Black Cube are connected to chthonic entities. I had to look up the word chthonic. It's spelled Chthonic. The definition of that word is concerning, belonging to, or inhabiting the underworld, as in a chthonic deity. The author goes on to explain that the ruling intelligence of these entities is not a good or kindly being, and he names it as the Saturnine deity. He explains that in all his studies of mythology and magical traditions, it was always the more savage and monstrous elements he was drawn to. He devotes his book to the Saturnine deity and explains that it contains secret rites and practices that are thousands of years old, but that are still being practiced today. In the third part of the book, he details quite a few of those, and I must admit, I skimmed over that part of the text. I found it quite distasteful, and no way was I going to be reading any incantations or trying to conjure up any dark forces, because I know that they exist and I know what they can do. In the book's overview, the author says he studied several ancient religious systems, and among all of these traditions found that most contain deities that are different from one another. Only Saturn, he maintains, appears in multiple cultures with the same basic characteristics. He maintains that a Saturnine deity is the same entity across these religions and occult systems. He examines several Islamic texts in order to ascertain the Islamic view of the Saturnine deity. He looks at certain words in these texts that are emphasized and repeated over and over again. The Arabic word used for the Saturnine deity in these books is Zuhal, that's spelled Z-U-H-A-L, which means the one who is far away or the alien. In this tradition, the deity is presented as the champion of the desperate, the greedy, the rebel, and those driven by vengeance. This is similar to the role played in Christianity by the adversary, Satan. The devotees of Saturn fear the deity, but they are able to appeal to him by offering something in trade, because, to quote the author, magic involves trade, and this trade comes in the form of sacrifice. Terms such as evil, angry, and black are used to describe the deity. The deity can be communicated with, and a reference is made to the veneration of a black stone which represents him. Zuhal is the source of, quote, evil, decay, destruction, sorrow, and uncleanness, end quote. In addition, the deity has a very bad temper and is vindictive. The types of sacrifices offered to him are things like, quote, old hides, grease, leather, and dead bats, end quote. No gold or incense for this god. The jinn, which in Islam play a role like that of demonic entities in Christianity, are also attracted to these kinds of sacrifices, especially those which are dead, filthy, and bloody. The author points out that a devout Muslim would be shocked by reading about these sacrifices offered to Zuhal. The author of one of the Islamic texts describes Zuhal in this way, quote, he is the Lord of evil and sin and filth and dirt and poverty. Prostrate yourselves to him in the form of a black stone on black sand, and seek refuge from him against his evil. His anger is to be feared. If you pray to him when he is angered, repeat your prayer and the sacrifice when he is content, and remind him of the earlier prayer and repeat it to him so that you might escape his evil, end quote. Other words used to describe the deity are eternal, powerful, enduring, and heavyweight, which suggests that the deity is timeless and will have power over the course of time. The deity is described as both the source of evil and yet honorable. The explanation offered for this contradiction is that if the devotee offers the proper sacrifice to the deity, this will be acknowledged and received accordingly. However, the deity will be provoked to anger if it is not afforded the proper respect. Saturn is described as cold and slow-moving, but feared by the other planets and stars. The terms black and dark are used to describe it. For this reason, black animals, trees, and minerals are sacred to it. The author of one Islamic text, the Picatrix, says that the Saturnine idol is a black cube of some kind. Zuhal rules over strange and mysterious things, secrets, and those things that are hidden or taboo. Therefore, he is not the god of public knowledge, and he guards secrets and hides things. The Picatrix describes the influence of Zuhal in this way, quote, Saturn's power is cold, hard, and its core is made of misfortune, corruption, stinky, vicious, betrayal, and is scary. Saturn also, if he gets a hold of any matter, it betrays, separates, and scares. It also has the signs of depression, grudge, cunning, circumcision, refuge, no socialization, and every other matter which has to do with evil. Grimness, death, cheating, accusations, the knowledge of secrets, and the mysterious side of things. The secret nature of Zuhal is the power of restraint, end quote. Adherents to the worship of Zuhal are advised to worship on Saturday, which is, of course, where the term Saturday comes from, Saturn, and dress in black, which is Saturn's color. Certain classes of people are especially vulnerable to Saturn's influence, we are told. Of note are kings and rulers, criminals, and the dead. The magicians of the cultures that worshipped Saturn were adept in the visible summoning of spirits and could even do so in front of an audience. Zuhal is said to have influence over death and the dead. One line from the ancient text says the magician who invokes the spirit prays, quote, then when we die, ward off the worms and reptiles from our flesh, end quote. What does Zuhal look like according to these Islamic texts? One describes him as crow-headed and a camel-footed man seated on a throne with a scepter in the right hand and a spear in the left. The crow and the camel are both Saturnine animals. The crow because it's black and has an ugly voice and represents wisdom and malice, and the camel because it's a tough, enduring animal. There are other accounts that vary somewhat from this description. All three of the Islamic texts that the author cites discuss the need to sacrifice to the Saturnine deity. Sacrifices are made to an idol which represents the deity. In one of the accounts, the idol is a black stone. In another one of them, the idol is supposed to be made with iron feet because iron is the metal of Saturn, and the idol is dressed in clothes of black, green, and red. However, another account describes the deity as a cube. The cube is said to house 6 component souls plus an additional spirit. Because the text explicitly mentioned that Saturn's color is black, the cube is a black cube. So to summarize, the Islamic tradition suggests that Zuhal is either a humanoid idol dressed in black with secondary colors, or else a black stone cube. And it's interesting to note that one of the most famous black cubes in the entire Islamic world is the Kaaba. And along with that, the devotees who practice the Hajj, the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, circumambulate around the Kaaba, which has a black stone on the inside of it, and they circumambulate around the Kaaba, which is a representation probably of the rings of Saturn. Next time I will return and I will talk about Saturn as he is expressed in the classical tradition and then in the Indian tradition.